Thanks for having me. Actually, thanks for everyone who was interested in this. Um, I'm surprisingly nervous to do this presentation. I didn't think that I was going to be, but I am. Um, hello, hi. My name's Jay. I work at NiDog. Uh, I am a accessibility QA and development support individual, which means that I not only do quality assurance when things come to accessibility, but I also do development support, which means that if a dev needs help with any aspect of accessibility, like combat, audio, high contrast mode, I'm there to assist them if they need help, if they get too busy. Um, and yeah, so to preemptively, before I even start the short presentation, um, I will not be answering any questions directly related to Naughty Dog. Just FYI, please don't ask any questions about what we're working on or anything like that. I will not be answering those. So yeah, let me share my screen. I also can't see the Discord or chat when I share my screen. So if you have any questions, just hold them until afterwards. Okay, cool. So this is a presentation that I've done for the accessibility group at Sony. It's a short presentation about ally-friendly design in gaming. The ally has two 11s in it because accessibility is a very long word. So ally is a short way to say that it's for accessibility. Okay, so as journalist Ian Hamilton describes, and Ian Hamilton is a very prominent figure in the accessibility community, games are often guilty of furthering the myth that a disability is rare. Accessibility isn't just in features, it's in representation, in characters, and in the world. And a quote from Able Gamers, people with disabilities are individuals who are disabled in some way. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, nearly 1 in 4 American adults have a disability, and that's over 60 million people. There are also 3 million children under the age of 18 that have disabilities, and they can range in type, severity, but there's 6 main categories of disabilities, and that's mobility, hearing, vision, cognition, independent living, and self-care. So disabilities come in all forms. Um, Disabilities are not just visible, like having like a service animal or wearing a brace or using a cane. People that are hard of hearing and people that are blind may not necessarily be wearing a hearing aid or using a cane to get around. Anxiety is also a form of a disability. You can never tell when anyone has anxiety unless they're actively portraying that they're having a panic attack or fear or dread or a phobia. Um, Celiac disease is also considered a disability, and that's when you're allergic to wheat, gluten, malt rye, like myself. I probably should have started off with I am a disabled individual. I am deaf and blind on my right side, and I have a motor disability caused by a disconnect in my nervous system. So there's numerous things in everyday life, and they're often ignored by abled individuals. And then there's things that abled individuals use that they don't realize were invented or created for a disabled individual. Like how many people here who are not deaf use subtitles? It's that's what they were created for, and now everyone just uses them. So there's doors, curbs, that are in everyday life that are not very accessible. Um, Curbs are not great for wheelchairs or any mobile devices. The spinning, rotating doors are also a nightmare for anyone, not just disabled individuals. And then getting creative and creating doors like the one on the left, which is supposed to be a gift that's moving and it's not. I apologize. And it's a kinetic door, which means that it can open and close with like the slightest push of force. But the problem with that is that you can't control when it's closing or when it's opening or the speed at which it's doing it if you're in a wheelchair. So even though it's cool and it's a neat invention, it's not very accessible. But calling back to the previous slide where I said that people use things that were created for disabled individuals and for everyday life, there's an effect called the curb cut effect, which was when they made a dip in the curb for sidewalks and crossing streets, and that was originally created for people with wheelchairs. They noticed that everyone was using them. Moms using strollers, people just not wanting to step up onto the curb, and then eventually they added the little bumps in cities where people using canes can feel that they're at the crosswalk. So the curb cut effect has become this thing to call out whenever something is made for a certain group of people, but everyone just ends up using it. And then there's stairs. Um, Stairs are the bane of everyone's existence, especially in game design. Stairs and doors are the worst when it comes to getting animation to work properly on them. Um, so stairs in everyday life have been slowly trying to get more accessible, um, with like the little elevators and the stairs that go up in houses. The problem with these things is that they can break down almost every day, and they're not maintenanced as often as they should be. The stairs on the right are like getting there to be accessible, but imagine how long this would take you to get up this in a wheelchair when somebody that can just walk straight it cuts cuts off everything that you have to go in a zigzag. And then we get things like this, like these ramps that go at a 90-degree angle. Nobody is going to use this. Maybe skateboarders and rollerbladers, and maybe kids using it as a slide, but no one in a wheelchair or a mobile assisted device is going to use this ramp. And once again, cool things that may look neat are not very accessible. So when you're designing things in your game and you want a disabled individual to feel like, oh, I could be in this world, things like this are very um, I wouldn't be able to use this. But also, you could also put this in a game and make it possible for someone who's disabled that cannot use this in real life and they can still use it. So that's where consultants come in handy, because if a consultant comes and looks at your game and says, I don't like this, and you should always get multiple consultants. And if you get a bunch of more disabled consultants saying, no, this isn't good, then it's probably not good. So a great version of a game that has a great design for disabled individuals was Plainsong from Horizon Forbidden West. And this area doesn't have any stairs. It's all ramps. It's all either like the zip line feature or and stuff like that. This was the first time that I played a level in a game where I was walking around as Aloy and I said, "Wow, I could walk here. I could visit this place myself," and it felt so good to see that. And then we have small things that can be added that are, some people will look at it and be like, oh, I don't need this. This doesn't need to be in here. But it's a big deal to others, especially like in Forza, where they added the hearing aid customization. It was a huge deal for hard of hearing individuals that saw it and were like, wow, that's me. That's me in a game. And it always makes people feel good to see that. Oh no. Oh, well, my videos did not embed, unfortunately. Um, but this is a short clip of Haley Cooper from Spider-Man, uh, made by Insomniac Games. It is the first deaf black character in a video game, and it was very widely positively received by the hard of hearing community, by the black community, and also by just gamers in general. They loved her. I also love her. She's great. And she was motion captured, and all of her ASL was performed by an actual hard of hearing individual. So even the tiniest things can have an impact. As in Animal Crossing, you can add a wheelchair. It's the teeny tiniest little thing to someone else. It's just a chair, and then to someone that is in a wheelchair in real life can relate and say, "That's me. That's me in this game." And I think the main thing about making games accessible by design is making the player feel good and seen. So Katalo in Horizon Forbidden West. If you can't tell, I made this presentation when Horizon Forbidden West came out. He is a beautiful representation of somebody that's wearing a prosthetic. Um, you go through a whole side quest. Spoilers for people who have not played this game yet. But Kotalo is a warrior, and he loses his arm, and it affects his self-esteem. And Aloy helps him find parts to make a prosthetic for him, and you make him this prosthetic arm, and it makes him able to do all of his warrior feats just as normally as he could before, if not stronger, because it's made out of a machine. When you finish the battle with it, when he's testing it, he takes it off. And Aloy questions him and says, "Why would you do that when we went through all this hard work just to give you your arm back?" And his feedback to her is, "It just doesn't feel like it's a part of me anymore. Like, this is me. This is who I am. And this helps me, but it's not who I am anymore." And that's another thing that consultants were very important for in development. So there's invisible and visible disabilities. So in this case, on the left is Josh from Watch Dogs 2. And he is a quiet and focused hacker who is revealed throughout the course of the game to be autistic. And then on the right, you have Bentley from Sly Cooper. Um, and he's always in a wheelchair, but it does not hinder, he's not hindered by it, and the world does not react poorly to him being in the wheelchair either. I also really like Josh as an autistic person myself, and as he is a great representation of autism. He's not one dimensional, offensively blunt, or rude like other autistic characters in fiction tend to be. Um, and I actually have a additional presentation about autism in video games. If you guys enjoy listening to me talk, I could possibly do that one too. So then we also have steady progression, and this is probably a hot take, but I love Handsome Jack as a villain. He is extremely well written, and he has borderline personality disorder, which is something that isn't portrayed in media very often, and it's something that's not portrayed very well. And although it's not portrayed very well with Handsome Jack because he is a villain, it is well done with the way that he portrays himself, his mental state, that he's unwilling to ask for help, and it really shows like that he's been mentally abused, and that it led him down this dark path, which is a bad um, it's a bad rhetoric for um, people with mental disabilities. But then it comes back around where uh, Gearbox, sorry, I almost forgot who made Borderlands. Gearbox, when they first started, they made the character Tiki Baha, and he's a blind character. He's a radical, and he uses his disability to make people feel uncomfortable through humor. Um, and it was well done for the time, but it wasn't great. And then Jack was okay. And then in the most recent in Borderlands 3, we get to actually like see Sir Hammerlock and like actually see him in his daily life. And it's nice that it was the steady progression of them reaching this point where Hammerlock is now a queer, disabled black character that enjoys his life, and he has a happy ending. And Billy from Dishonored is another example about how development can, yeah, take two steps forward, one step back, like I said. So Billy is a character that ends up disabled through the course of the story. She loses an eye and an arm, and she doesn't let that affect her daily life. But this also leads into um, the the theory that if you are disabled and you get fixed, you are miraculously cured and better. And while I love the Dishonored games and I love Billy, it was very weird to see her suddenly become fixed, and then it just you can fix her in Dishonored 2, and then in Death of the Outsider, she loses her eye and her arm again, and it just felt very strange. That why would you give me the option to help her and then not help her and then make me feel like she wasn't really disabled, and it was, yeah, not great storytelling. And then disabilities are not always a hindrance. And while some people may not like Blizzard or Overwatch, Overwatch does a very good job of representing disabilities in a positive light. Which is Symmetra is autistic, and Reinhardt has extreme PTSD, and then Junkrat is missing, an arm and a leg. But all three of these characters, they don't let any of these disabilities affect their daily life, and no other character treats them differently for having them. So fortunately, like I said, my videos did not embed for some reason when I downloaded this. So this was a video of Kiriko, which was a character that was added to Overwatch 2. In her short, she is speaking JSL to a little girl. And ASL is not the only form of sign language. So sign language exists all over the world in different languages. There's JSL, BSL, anywhere that you can go has their own form of sign language, and they don't necessarily connect to each other. So if I was speaking ASL to someone who speaks BSL, they may not fully understand what I'm saying, but there are crossovers. But it is like speaking two different language, and ASL is a language. It's not something that you can like just push aside as being like it's just for the deaf community. It is other people use ASL, especially those that can sometimes have like moments where they go nonverbal. They can learn ASL, but they might not necessarily be deaf or hard of hearing. Yeah. And then the power of humor. Humor is my favorite thing to do when I talk to people about my personal disabilities. Um, and this is Joker from Mass Effect. He has brittle bone disease, and whenever you have a conversation with him, he spits out the humor, and it's great. It's done so well, and he's not making humor at the expense of others. He's making humor, not really at the expense of himself either, but he can be humorous about his own disability. Animals count too. This is from Far Cry, and animals can have many disabilities. Your dog, your cat, your bird may have PTSD. It may have anxiety, and may have motor disabilities. There can be blind and deaf animals. Like it also counts in animals too. So if you have animals in your game or thinking about having animals in your game, you can also do disabled representation for them. So now we get into the part where there's dangerous narratives. And once again, spoiler warnings if you have not played either of these games. So, Life is Strange. The one on the left is Nathan Prescott. He's portrayed as a violent individual. He's responsible for a murder in one timeline. Well, in the main timeline. Throughout the game, you learn that he's medicated for both schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And instead of using this as a way to sympathize with him, it's instead fuel for a dangerous narrative that people like him are crazy and uncontrollably violent and cannot be cured. And on the right is Ori and the Will of the Wisp. And there's a long-standing history in various forms of media that disabled characters are often portrayed as the villains. Most of these portrayals conjure up ableist notions about disabilities. Disabled and disfigured bodies are used as a visual shortcut to emphasize that these characters are villains because they are different. And the villainous behavior is inherently linked to their disability. And in Ori and Will the Wisp, Ori and Ku, the owl, work together to help develop a prosthetic wing. In retrospect, this scene comes across as the player less identifying with Ku, and you're more identifying with Ori because you're playing as Ori. And you control Ori during this scene. So when you see Ku experience their first flight, um, you can play as Ku, but it lasts for less than a minute. And this is very typical of media portrayals of disability, where narratives portray the abled person as the hero and the disabled person as an object of pity. This first further emphasizes the narrative that disabled life is inherently tragic and can only be better if it's cured. So that leads into research is important. So on the left is from Gotham Knights and a quote from Grant Stoner. My new favorite thing about Gotham Knights, saying they consulted with accessibility specialists about representation, is one of the side characters in a manual wheelchair with an electric joystick, and there's no motor on his chair. So if you say that you've consulted with people and you make a big deal out of it. You tell people, "Yep, I have disabled representation. I consulted with people," and something like this happens, the community is going to know. They're going to know that you did not, and it's just for accolades. And the one on the right is Gustav. He's from Spiritfarer. This is also kind of a spoiler. One of the characters in the game comments, Gustav, that death came as a release from the limitations of his wheelchair. This is a quote from the creators of Spiritfarer once they realized what they had done and then they fixed what they did. So we understand that we unwittingly perpetuated ideas and language that have traditionally been used to exclude and discriminate against people with disabilities while reinforcing ableist views of what they should find empowering. This directly undermines the empathetic spirit that we wish to infuse into every aspect of this game, and we regret this failure. So after they gave this statement, they removed this line from the game and they updated his character. So this is the only part of Naughty Dog that is going to be in this presentation. This is my crowning achievement or can't Naughty Dog. This is from The Last of Us Part 1, which was the remake of The Last of Us. And when this scene was first done in high contrast mode, on the left, if you don't know this scene, this is also a big spoiler. If you do know this scene, then you'll understand why this had to be changed. So on the left is Henry. After his brother Sam had become infected, he shoots his brother. He starts going into a panic attack and takes out a gun and puts it to his own head. In the first run of this in high contrast mode, Henry was labeled red as a villain, as an enemy. And when he put the gun to his head, he looked like just an enemy that was killing himself. And it just didn't feel right with me at all. So I gave feedback to the developers. I said, "Hey, this looks very strange to me. Um, it feels very insensitive to those who have committed suicide, those who have attempted, and those who have seen others or lost others to suicide." So on the right is the final version of what's in the game. And this is Henry now appears as an ally in distress and not a dangerous individual with thoughts of suicide that is a danger to Joel. So, the future of games, accessibility in games. This is a quote from accessibility.com. Things have gotten better over the years and things are continuing to get better. There are still improvements to be made. One concern is that progress within the industry has not been consistent across all regions. And despite its global popularity, Japan based Nintendo is known for being behind when compared to other major companies in the industry. I can also attest to this as I just got echoes of wisdom yesterday. There are no accessibility options. There are actually no options at all except to change the difficulty. And even as hardware and software improve, one of the biggest barriers to many gamers with disabilities is cost. As the industry continues to grow, ongoing advocacy, collaboration, and education will be essential to ensure a more accessible gaming future for all. And there's a link here, and I'll share a bunch of information in the knowledge sharing channel after this, where you can become a certified accessible player experiences practitioner from Able Gamers. And then another few things that you can look into is the website Can I Play That? Um, and make sure that you have accessibility teams when you're creating your games and disabled representation in any focus tests that you do, and start in the very, very early phases of your game. The earlier you start with making things accessible, the better, because you don't want to make it all the way to the end of development and be like, "Oh man, I could make this accessible." It's going to be next to impossible or very, very expensive to do. Thank you for watching, listening, watching this presentation. Let me go ahead. I know, I'm waiting. I'm also reading the chat, and thank you guys. This makes me feel really good about choosing to do this. Yeah, of course, I can definitely do the autism one. That's a more recent presentation that I made. It is autism representation is very important to me as an autistic individual myself, and you don't really see that in games portrayed well.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation and your representation in the gaming industry. As a veteran and somebody who also has disabilities, I know that a lot of people coming back from Afghanistan, Iraq, and other different types of wars and circumstances, I do love to enjoy play video games and stuff like that. But due to some cutscenes and triggers, it might be a time that's not as pleasurable as it used to be. I was just wondering what is the best approach that you've seen that works with that? Additionally, trigger warnings and other things that might be useful that you would consider adding to games.
That's a really good question and something that definitely needs to be implemented more. Um, uh, Most of the time when you want to implement like a trigger warning or something like that, design will say that stops the creative vision. It ruins the creative vision because you're being removed from the experience to see this trigger warning pop up, right? Um, Personally, I think the more accessibility, the better. Like, the remake of Dead Space did this very well, where you have there's like a PTSD trigger content warning whenever you come up to a scene that's going to have it, and you have the option to blur everything that's happening, so you can't see any of the gore. The problem with that is you can still hear it. So while it's a step towards the right direction, it's not perfect. Um, I will say that games that have trigger warnings in the beginning are also a step towards the right direction. I personally wish that there were options to skip um, scenes that could trigger PTSD. In a perfect world, an ideal future, right? You'd be able to have the tech to put in your own PTSD triggers into a game and say, I can't see, I can't hear the sound of a gun getting reloaded. I can't hear the sound of a specific type of gun firing, or I can't hear any sort of like SA, right? And then the game would know, and then it would know when that scene would come up, and then you'd be able to be like, okay, this is coming. I can either look away, I can skip the scene, I can, or something like that. Another thing that really does it well is the game Grounded, which has spiders in it, and arachnophobia is one of the biggest phobias in the world. And you can turn on the arachnophobia slider, and it literally just turns them into like bouncing orbs the further you turn it down. Um, I Yeah, I think this is something that would benefit greatly from being implemented more into future projects. Um, it is hard because you don't know how many trigger warnings you need. You don't know how many like it's rough, especially for like the creative design for writers to be like, what if this is sensitive? And then you don't want to get caught in the development loop, right? Where you're, oh no, this could cause a problem. Then I need to fix it. And then you fix it. And then you're like, oh no, this could also cause a problem. And then you end up in this loop of development. So this is another thing where um, uh, consultants are your best friend. Um, and consultants can, they can range from anyone on social media to be like, yeah, I can help you out. Also, make sure that they're actually consultants and not just some random person from social media. But I can also provide people that you can reach out to for that. Uh, and some of them will willingly help you out if it's an indie game for free. And most of them are they charge by the hour or they charge by project. But it is very important to get multiple consultants and multiple feedback when it comes to things like this. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, I think we're all on the same boat on about being able to skip some scenes. Thank you very much.
I don't think I can share the slides because this was a presentation that had to be approved by SIE for me to share it. Um, it's Nebulous? Nebulaus?
Hi. Yes. Okay. I didn't know that I didn't know the raise hand thing. Sorry about that. Uh yeah, well, once just have to say thank you for the presentation and everything. It's amazing like what you do and how you are explaining everything. But and I wanted to just follow up on that one little example of Hammerlock that you had mentioned in Borderlands. That the when you described the character, that felt a little odd to me. The character was a queer person who was a person of color and also having a disability. Did that feel a little like a tokenization of a character just to tick boxes of some sort? Because that felt a little odd when I heard the description of him, at least.
Yeah, and I can totally understand how it could feel that way, reading it out like that, because for the purpose of the presentation, I wanted to make sure that things were condensed. But Hammerlock is a character that has developed over time, because he was in Borderlands 2. And in Borderlands 2, it did feel like checking off boxes. Like, here's a black character. Here's a black disabled character. Like, oh, here we go. Here's representation, you guys. That's definitely what it felt like. But then when Borderlands 3 came around, it didn't feel as much of a tokenization because he's so well developed. So there is way more to his character than just being LGBT, black, and disabled. Like that's just part of the presentation. And the main point about him is that even with all of these things that kind of feel like a token checkoff, he does have a happy ending. And most of the time when people put in like especially LGBT representation as tokenization, which we all know the term, I'm sure, kill your gays, it always ends up being like a negative ending for those people. So I could do probably a whole presentation on the the development of Hammerlock, but yes, in Borderlands 2 when he was first introduced, he did feel like a token character. By the time Borderlands 3 comes around, he is much more developed.
Okay, I guess I understand it, but I wanted to kind of delve a bit more on this tokenization of characters in general. Like, when is it good and when is it bad? Because the way I'm hearing it, in two it was bad, but in three it was good? Question mark. I'm just trying to figure.
Yeah, it's kind of like a thin line, right? Because everybody wants to see themselves in media, um, and they want to see representation. So when it does happen, it's oh yeah, there I am, and then it ends up being like, oh, but is this for a good reason? Is this for a bad reason? And this does actually meld into the autism presentation that I also have, because autism is often used as tokenization to be like, here it is, here's a disabled character, done. And most of the time, when you think about an autistic character in media, you think of a white male, and that ends up being the tokenization of that, and that ends up being bad. Um, like, I think a way to not make it feel like you're putting stuff in a game just to put it in a game is not just have a single character have a disability, or not just have a single black character, right? Or a single POC, I should say, in your game. Because then it'll feel like, oh, they're here just for representation. They're here just to check off a box. Um, so the more things that you add, the better, which also made Hammerlock better in Borderlands 3 because he had a partner. And then his partner was also LGBT. So then he wasn't the only person in the game that had these attributes. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm kind of getting that understanding there. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Man, I hope I answered that okay. Tokenization is such a sensitive topic, and it's okay. So this is a question more related to what I do on a day-to-day basis, and physical disability settings. Definitely different options for controls, right? Like um, in in The Last of Us, for example, there's a huge accessibility menu, and they're separated into categories, and there's one for like navigation and traversal, and you can put on like traversal assistance, so that way, like a player who's going through the world, they don't need to press X every time that they want to climb something. It'll just automatically climb something. So, or in the case of like combat, right? Sometimes in I'm I'm a PlayStation person at heart, obviously, so I'm gonna relate things to the PlayStation controller. But to like aim weapons when you hold down one of the triggers, like you have to hold it down and then aim with the joystick and then fire with the other one, right? So then you want to give more options where it's, oh, you can just toggle it, like you can just um hit it once and then the gun's aimed and then you can move around. So then you're not putting more stress on someone who might be physically disabled that might be unable to hold the controller with both hands, or or not even hold their controller at all. Um, Giving the option to change controls is very important for physical disabilities. For mental disabilities, there's a thing called cognitive overload, which can happen if you have way too many controls. Like if someone is using every single button on the controller, like that can cause cognitive overload to somebody that has a mental disability. Um, and yeah, for cognitive accessibility, cognitive accessibility is actually a big topic right now in the industry, because it's something that's often pushed aside, because when you think of accessibility, you think motor disability, deaf and blind. Um, and cognitive is I'm trying to get my words together here. Sorry. I have a cognitive disability, so I'm having trouble getting my thoughts together. But things that you can help mitigate cognitive overload would be like quest logs, map markers, mini maps, um, reminders if a player has forgotten to do something, like if they pick up like upgrade items and then they're not going back to the spot where they need to upgrade something, or they haven't opened their menu to upgrade something and they have like a huge surplus of stuff, like a little slide on pop up to say, hey, you have upgrade material. Like that also really helps. um yeah, that mostly just cognitive overload. Keeping an eye on that and controls. It does make sense. Personally, I'm a person that says if it wasn't made for you, then it's not for you. But they could still use it. The curve cut effect. But in terms of like being able to articulate and explain why a certain feature is in a game, um, some people may not ever understand why it's in there. And that's something that took me a little while to come to terms with, because I am an accessibility like honey badger. Like I go after accessibility in the industry like crazy, and always point out flaws, and I'm always like, why doesn't this have this? And not everyone shares that passion. Mine's a little extreme. And so when you're explaining it to people and you're saying, hey, like I need awareness indicators um, to show me where an enemy is, because I get turned around in games, or I have a hard of hearing. I can't tell when there's an enemy behind me, or something like that, or it's really dark, and you don't want to be scared, kind of thing. um I guess to break it down, to explain it to somebody, it would be, this is helpful for me, and this would be helpful for so and so group of people. um and if you don't find it helpful, or you don't find a use for it, most of these things can be turned off in the options menu. And even if they can't, then this is feedback for the company themselves. Um, don't be afraid to give feedback to companies, by the way. Um, we do see it. So if you send like email, or even like snail mail, or reach out to somebody on like LinkedIn. I mean, obviously for good feedback, you don't want to just be like, "Oh, I didn't like this part of the story." Like nobody's going to listen to that, unfortunately. So you could send feedback to people and be like, "Yeah, this feature's in here. I wish I could turn it off." Um, and sometimes that gets fixed in patches. Um, or sometimes you could be like, "Hey, I really wish this had this." And then at some point when games get remastered or remade, it could get added in. That's what happened for The Last of Us Part 1. That's one of the main reasons why it was redone, was to get in all the accessibility features that were in Part 2, so that people who experienced Part 2 could also experience Part 1, because when Part 1 first released, it did not have any of these features. So it goes both ways. Um, but I think at the base, when you want to explain to people, it's just, this is helpful for me, and this is why. Um, and that's why it's in the game. That's the only reason. If it's helpful to you, that's why it's there. It can be about anything. It doesn't have to be about the presentation. It just cannot be about Nidog. Oh no. It's because I said they could ask anything. This might have been a mistake. Oh no. Yeah, I actually know a couple consultants in the industry, so I would be able to share that in the share resources channel. That seems like a good place to share that in. Um, and oh, this leads into Pat's question too. I don't mean to step on your toes, Rowan, but um, yeah, I would be definitely willing to share it. I can say them out loud too, so that it'll be recorded. So Chris Robinson, he's Deaf Gamers TV on Twitter. He is a hard of hearing deaf consultant, and he has helped us and helped other teams with their um, subtitles and awareness indicators and things like that. And then there's also Steve Saylor. He's a low vision blind consultant. He's also on Twitter. And Paul Amadeus, you can find him on LinkedIn. He's a motor disabled consultant. So that's one from each each thing. I am not an I am not an official consultant. I do consulting at work, but I haven't done it for other things. But if you need a um, cognitive consultant, I am also I am available for that personally. Um, yeah, I hope that that makes sense. There's some people that I can share in the share resources that you could connect with, but they're probably a little bit outside of indie games budget. The earlier the better. The earlier the better. It is imperative. Like if you are even thinking of a game, like thinking of like the narrative for a game, like think about how to make it accessible. Um, also, Pat's question, additional statement, not question, leads into this too. Um, I don't have like a quick cheat sheet that would help in developing games with accessibility in mind. It's mostly like you just want to keep it like that's actually yes, that is a great resource. Thank you, Melanite. That is great. Um, uh, Yeah, so like framework wise, and also adding accessibility early on development, do we have to? Yes. That's the short answer for that. Definitely yes. As for a framework, when you are going through making a game accessible, making it accessible by design is the best way to go about it. So, you know, there's some games that are, and this is the equity versus equality. Um, topic. And there's some games that have accessibility in them that don't even realize it. Like Genshin Impact, for example, has the scan, the It's called something, and I can't think of what it is right now. But the elemental site. There we go. And you can scan it, and then it shows like the world in like this little low contrast thing, and it's really easy to see where things are. It's easy to see what element things are, where treasure chests are, like, and that's like accidental accessibility by design, right? And you want to keep in mind the cognitive overload. So if you're making a game that's going to require a lot of button presses, how can you make them less? How can you add different key bind options that would make it easier on somebody? Um, and subtitles are a must. Um, it and not all games need dialogue, so you don't always need someone talking. You could just have written text. Um, And making games fully accessible is expensive and it is hard. It is very, very rare in the industry right now that a game is fully blind accessible. Um, I also have not seen a game with a character with a service dog, and if anybody can point one out, that would be great. I have not seen the service dog. I've only seen the disabled dog in Far Cry. Um, yeah, I definitely I love seeing animal representation. And that is something that needs to be expanded upon. So yeah, I have not seen a game with a service dog, and I think that would be great. And also, to break this down for everyone else who's in here, a service dog is not just for someone that's blind. Service dogs do lots of different things. They help out people with motor disabilities. They can help out people that are blind. They can help out people that are deaf. They can help out people that have PTSD, and they can help out people that have, like anxiety, panic attacks, um, epilepsy. Dogs, not just service dogs, but service animals are amazing. Um, I have a medical companion. I have a cat. Her name is Lizard, and I trained her myself. And she lets me know when I'm going to have one of my episodes. Um, so it can be anything. People have birds that can help them when they're about to have like an epileptic episode. It doesn't just have to be dogs, but dogs are definitely the smartest. No offense to my cat. When it comes to being service animals. Um, I hope that answered everything. I feel like there was a lot going on there for a second. No, it's okay. Oh no. Okay, I'm gonna be 100% honest. I am the worst when it comes to online communication. I am pretty bad at it. Um, but you can add me on LinkedIn. You can friend me on Discord. I I will answer if you message me. It may not be right away, but I will at some point. Don't worry, it won't be like a month long wait or anything like that. But you can definitely add me on LinkedIn. We can be connections for sure. Um, and I'm always open to talk about stuff like this. But if you would like consultation for a game that you're currently working on, that would have to be you sent me a friend request already. That would have to be a contract between the two of us, and not for free. This and maybe the autistic session will be my only two free freebies for you guys. So now is the time to ask questions. I I will also say too, because I am also getting new into the consulting world, and um and while I will say an expert in my field, I have been doing it for Naughty Dog for 3 years now, but I have been doing it um on the side for much longer. Um so I am not just, a newbie in the industry or anything like that. Um I have been doing this for a while. Aw, thanks, guys. Yeah, thanks for coming, and listening to me. And I am here to help. I am here to help make games accessible for the future, and indie games count too. Awesome. Bye.